My daughter, Charlotte, had finished her elementary school entrance exams, and all that was left was to wait for the results. Nervously, I checked the results website.
Hurry, hurry.
Urged Charlotte as I faced the screen. Then, scrolling through the page, I found Charlotte's exam number and name. She had passed.
Passed? Yay, yay, yay!
We both jumped for joy, shouting with excitement. I quickly sent a message to my husband, Matthew, to tell him the results. Surely, he would be happy too. I even had a faint hope that he might drop everything and come rushing home. But there were no words of congratulations or acknowledgement of her hard work from him.
I'll be late because of work. Then I have a business trip.
That was all his message said. I knew he was busy, often working even on weekends. But couldn't he at least share in our joy this one time? Why was it just a business-like message? Couldn't he imagine how hard Charlotte had worked? 3 days later, he came home, looking triumphant. He handed me a souvenir and patted Charlotte on the head.
Congratulations on passing. You did it.
Daddy, you did it too.
Immediately, she pulled out several photos and scattered them in front of him. As soon as he saw them, his face turned pale, and he began to tremble. My name is Linda Smith. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. I got married about 7 years ago, and now I live with my husband, Matthew, and our daughter, Charlotte. When I first met Matthew, he was a company employee, a serious workaholic. I was drawn to the way he laughed innocently like a child. Currently, he has taken over his father James's company and is working hard as the president. He leaves the house early in the morning and usually doesn't come back until after midnight. Being a president is really busy. I muttered to myself while waiting for him in the dark living room. I had imagined that he just sat at a desk approving documents, but apparently, that's not the case. Because he is so dedicated to his work, he leaves all the housework and childcare to me.
I'm busy with the company, so I'll leave the house and Charlotte to you.
No matter what I consult him about, he always ends the conversation with that. Of course, he doesn't do anything on his days off either. He spends the whole day lounging on the sofa, fiddling with his smartphone. Sometimes, he scatters magazines and comics around and takes naps. Could you at least play with Charlotte a little? I said in exasperation, and Matthew got angry.
I'm always tense and working hard. At least let me spend my days off as I please.
It's a line that doesn't sound like it came from a father. He doesn't do any housework or take care of Charlotte. His attitude of thinking that it's enough just to work left me speechless. Charlotte had just started kindergarten, but her uniqueness stood out right away. When the teacher spoke to her, she seemed distracted, and it was hard to tell if she was listening or not. She disliked playing in the mud and even hit a friend who invited her to join. During group activities, she often played alone instead of joining the circle. When she quietly read picture books, she would look at the same book all day and wouldn't lend it to her friends. Every time I picked her up from kindergarten, the teacher would tell me something new that surprised me. The homeroom teacher suggested that she might not be adjusting to the environment. Maybe she didn't know how to interact with her new friends yet. Although she's an only child, she can have normal conversations at home and doesn't seem to struggle with communication. She seemed to play normally at the local park. What's going on with Charlotte? I began to worry that she might be different from other kids since she started kindergarten. I talked to other moms, but they didn't think she was that unusual. I once tried to talk to Matthew about it.
Charlotte isn't fitting in at kindergarten?
Yes. She seems to play alone all the time and can't seem to play with her friends. Matthew responded with a disinterested, The homeroom teacher suggested that she might have a developmental disorder and that we should get her checked. As soon as he heard the words developmental disorder, he looked puzzled.
What? Isn't that when you can't keep track of time or forget things a lot?
Charlotte isn't like that.
Stop with the developmental disorder stuff. It's embarrassing.
He laughed through his nose. Even after that, whenever I brought up Charlotte, he would always laugh it off and dismiss my concerns.
If you just discipline her properly, that wouldn't happen. Do your job right.
He would end the conversation like that. Despite my repeated attempts to discuss Charlotte's behavior at kindergarten, he gradually started claiming he had work even on his days off and would go out. It felt like I was raising Charlotte all by myself, and the sense of loneliness kept growing.
Mommy, Mommy. Cheer up. Here's a flower.
Charlotte said, handing me a dandelion with an innocent smile on our way back from kindergarten. The flower, firmly held in her small hand, swayed adorably. Thank you. Mommy is so happy. I said, hugging Charlotte, not wanting to show her my worried face. Despite feeling lonely, I never lost hope. Although Charlotte is still a child, I decided to see her as an individual different from myself, without trying to fit her into a mold. Not everyone is the same, and there are differences in personality and sensitivity. I decided to accept that Charlotte might just be a little different from other kids. Perhaps this unique sensitivity is only temporary, and she might become more typical as she grows. She's only 5, and she'll keep changing for the better. I quietly reassured myself. One day, I was called by the kindergarten teacher. I assumed it was another trouble with friends. Sighing, I drove to the kindergarten. By this time, such calls had become a daily occurrence, and I had grown accustomed to them, for better or worse. The familiarity was frightening, and I found myself oddly excited, wondering what they would say this time. When I arrived at the staff room, the homeroom teacher and the principal came to escort me to the meeting room. As soon as we sat down, the principal said,
"Please have Charlotte take an intelligence test."
I was so surprised that I was left speechless. My mind couldn't keep up with this unexpected turn of events. Are you saying that my child isn't very smart? I asked. The homeroom teacher quickly interjected.
No, it's quite the opposite. She's actually exceptionally intelligent.
The teacher pulled out a drawing that Charlotte had made and showed it to me. It depicted pansies and marigolds in a flower bed, and it looked like an accurate sketch. Each petal and leaf vein was intricately drawn, with shadows carefully added. Even though it was a black and white drawing, it gave the illusion that the flowers were actually there. It was not the level of drawing expected from a 5-year-old. Additionally, Charlotte seems to have an exceptional memory. She remembers things like who said what and when, even if it was days ago. This has caused trouble several times. If I recall correctly, there was an incident where she made a friend cry during an argument about who said what. Moreover, when a new picture book is read to Charlotte, she remembers the title, author, and every single word of the content after just one reading. When the teacher tries to read that book to the class, Charlotte starts reciting the rest of the story, saying, "I know that one." Is that really possible? My daughter? I thought back to how she was at home, but she had never drawn such intricate pictures or recited picture books. She usually watched videos on her tablet or looked at the motorcycle magazines and comics that Matthew had left lying around. However, both the homeroom teacher and the principal nodded solemnly at my incredulous expression. They strongly recommended that I have her take an intelligence test because it could affect Charlotte's future. At the time, I was skeptical, thinking that might be an exaggeration. I found out that there was a facility nearby where she could take the intelligence test. I made a reservation, but as I watched my daughter playing in the living room, she seemed no different from any other child. But, now that I think about it, I remembered something that had caught my attention. When Charlotte was playing house at home, she had arranged stuffed animals and dolls around a toy table. The conversation was about recommended touring routes and the scenic views of the Inner Bay.
Let's go with the 4 of us next time. Teddy will be at the back.
She said this to the teddy bear. She seemed to have decided the running order, with herself and the dolls in the middle because they were girls. It might have been something she read in one of Matthew's discarded magazines, but it was a very realistic conversation. It wasn't the kind of talk you'd expect from a 5-year-old, like who was the dad, who was the mom, or what was for dinner. There was another time when my daughter used my laptop. I had opened it to look something up and stepped away for a moment, and Charlotte started using it. "What are you doing?" I asked.
Mommy, I want to play chess. Is that okay?
She replied. Peeking at the screen, I saw a chess game. It wasn't a children's chess software but the one pre-installed on the computer. Somehow, she had already moved several pieces. I wondered if a 5-year-old could really play chess. "Just for a little while," I said, thinking she would lose quickly. But to my surprise, she defeated the computer in no time.
Weak,
She muttered, staring at the screen with a sharp gaze that sent a chill down my spine. Once could be a coincidence, but even after several more games, she kept beating the computer. For a 5-year-old girl, her interests seemed quite unusual. "Could you be on your second life?" I asked on the day of the intelligence test, while driving to the support center.
What's that?
Sitting in her car seat, my daughter looked at me with a puzzled expression. She was just a regular 5-year-old after all. Maybe she was just a bit ahead of her peers. I didn't want to put too much pressure on her by having high expectations. "It's nothing." "Charlotte, you're so cute," I said. I didn't think the test results were that important. As long as Charlotte could be herself and make the most of her unique personality and sensitivity, that was enough. This test was just the first step in understanding her. When we went to hear the results a few days later, we found out that she was a genius with an IQ of 130. What? I was so surprised that I nearly jumped a foot out of my chair. The average IQ for children is around 100. But Charlotte had far exceeded that, scoring an exceptionally high number. I glanced at my angelic daughter with her innocent smile and wondered what she was thinking.
IQ?
She giggled, saying it was strange. If she had an IQ of 130, it made sense that she could recite picture books and draw sketches. At that moment, I decided to have Charlotte take the entrance exam for elementary school if it would benefit her future. When I informed the kindergarten teachers of the results, they were equally surprised. They were also pleased and supportive when I told them about the decision to have her take the entrance exam. That day, I went home with a stack of elementary school brochures. From then on, our days were filled with studying for the exam. I found a good prep school and planned to prepare her for the test. There were many things to prepare for besides the written test. Despite this, Charlotte seemed to enjoy the enthusiastic guidance from the prep school teachers and studying at home.
Mommy, what's next?
She didn't seem to mind learning new things and applying that knowledge. Once she learned something, she wanted more and more. Like a dry sponge soaking up water, she absorbed everything. She was also good at drawing, using scissors and glue, and was fairly athletic. Her weakness is that she struggles with cooperating with friends and reading the situation around her. Try to listen to the teacher properly, I said.
It's boring.
The teacher tells you what everyone will do next. She has a schedule. Your friends follow that schedule too. You can't play musical chairs if you don't know when to start.
I don't understand the point of playing musical chairs. Why do we play it?
There are several reasons, but one is to learn to play by the rules.
Oh, I see.
When she understood, her face lit up with a smile. When things were explained step by step, she accepted them surprisingly smoothly. As I continued to teach her in this detailed manner, Charlotte gradually started to get along with her friends. The number of troubles decreased significantly, and I felt relieved. On the other hand, Matthew's attitude towards Charlotte was cold. He was rarely home due to working on weekends, so he hardly saw Charlotte. When he passed by the living room where Charlotte was studying, he would snort.
I heard people with developmental disorders are only smart in the head.
He would say this mockingly and walk away. His attitude irritated me. Matthew, don't say things like that, I said. How could he say such things without even trying to understand Charlotte?
Shut up. I'm tired from work, don't raise your voice.
He said, covering his ears with his hands, looking annoyed. He chose to work, so how could he say that? I wanted to argue, but I didn't want to fight in front of Charlotte. She had a good memory, and I didn't want her to hear such embarrassing arguments. The sound of the living room door closing echoed emptily. Was Matthew really only thinking about work? This happened several times, and each time I told him to stop. I'm sorry, Charlotte. Don't pay attention to what Daddy says, I told her. Surprisingly, Charlotte seemed unfazed.
It's okay, Mommy. Besides, everything Daddy says is a lie.
She said this with a smile, but it wasn't a sweet smile. It seemed more like a cunning grin. What did she mean by everything is a lie? I felt a sense of unease about her words, but it would be a while before I understood what she meant. A few months later, the elementary school entrance exam was over, and all that was left was to wait for the results. The exam was apparently more difficult than expected, and Charlotte seemed a bit unsure of herself. She was quite tired and spent a lot of time watching videos absent-mindedly. However, after a week, she started drawing those intricate pictures on large sheets of paper again. She seemed to enjoy drawing, just as she did during her exam preparation. Every day, she would come home and draw, and the number of her drawings kept increasing. Then, The day of the exam results arrived. Nervously, I checked the results website.
Mommy, is it there? Is it not?
Just a moment, I said, facing the screen while Charlotte urged me to hurry. Scrolling through the page, I found Charlotte's exam number and name. She had passed. Congratulations, Charlotte. You passed. You passed.
Passed? Yay, yay, yay!
We both jumped for joy, shouting with excitement. Given how difficult she found the exam, this success must have been especially meaningful for her. We had to celebrate Charlotte's hard work and success. So, I quickly sent a message to Matthew to inform him of the results. Surely, he would be happy too. I even had a faint hope that he might drop everything and come rushing home. But that hope was completely shattered.
I'll be late because of work, and then I have a business trip.
That was all his message said. There were no words of congratulations or acknowledgement of her hard work. It was just a business-like message. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. I decided to put a certain plan into action. Although I wasn't feeling calm, I couldn't show it in front of my daughter. I carried on, holding on to my unresolved feelings, and waited patiently. 3 days after Charlotte's exam results were announced, Matthew came home in high spirits. He entered the living room humming a tune, smiling as if his previous attitude had been a lie. He handed me a souvenir and patted Charlotte on the head.
Congratulations on passing. Well done.
Daddy, you messed up too.
Immediately, Charlotte pulled out several photos and scattered them in front of Matthew. The photos showed Matthew with a young woman, looking very affectionate on a trip. He was smiling at her in a way I had never seen him smile at me.
What? How?
He looked confused, with question marks practically floating above his head, wondering how his actions had been discovered. I, on the other hand, looked at him with a cold stare. Suppressing my boiling anger, I began to explain without raising my voice. Actually, Charlotte had a photographic memory, the ability to instantly remember what she saw. Her kindergarten teacher had mentioned that her memory was exceptionally good, and it was due to this ability. During Charlotte's exam preparation, Matthew was sitting on the sofa, facing away from the dining table, looking at his messages. From her vantage point at the table, Charlotte could see the contents of the messages. That's how I found out from Charlotte, I explained. Charlotte had memorized the details of when and where the trip would take place and told me the next morning.
Hey, Daddy is going on a trip.
What? He was supposed to inform me whenever he went on a business trip, but he hadn't said a word. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. I asked Charlotte for more details. When she said, "Everything Daddy says is a lie," I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But she said it because she knew Matthew was pretending to be on a business trip while actually traveling with another woman.
There's no way that's true. This isn't a comic book.
I've been suspicious of you for a while, I said.
What?
Matthew looked as if he'd been hit with a ton of bricks. The truth is, his parents had subtly hinted at his infidelity. His father, James, had already retired but had heard about Matthew's actions through old acquaintances. At first, I didn't want to believe it. But when I heard from Charlotte, I immediately contacted your father, I continued.
Why?
He told me to let him know if anything happened with you. I tried to get the schedule details from Charlotte. Although she couldn't read difficult words like place names or hotel names yet, she could remember what she saw on the screen and draw it on paper.
You mean you had her draw the screen from memory?
Exactly. Among the many sheets of paper Charlotte had drawn on, there it was. She had drawn Matthew's smartphone screen across several sheets. I pulled them out and showed them to Matthew, just as the kindergarten teacher had shown me before. The drawings included not only the conversation but also the battery level and the time the messages were sent. Even Leonard da Vinci would be impressed. Matthew turned pale and started trembling as soon as he saw the drawings. I took photos of these drawings and sent them to James, informing him of Matthew's schedule. James secretly went to the location and took photos of Matthew and his mistress during their trip. Faced with this evidence, Matthew had no way to deny it.
No way. This can't be happening.
He looked at Charlotte, who was standing nearby, with a face that clearly said, "I can't believe this." He never imagined that the daughter he had mocked so much would get back at him like this. I stepped between Charlotte and him, deciding to change the subject. "By the way, your partner is a beautiful 27-year-old secretary, right? Your father knows about her too.
What, that is?
Could you introduce her to me and these two as well?" As soon as I finished speaking, the door opened, and his parents walked in. They had been hiding in the back room all along. Matthew turned even paler and started sweating profusely. I even wondered if I should get him some water. He looked at his parents, then at me, and finally at Charlotte, fumbling with his hands and mouth.
"Matthew, let's hear your explanation."
James was furious, to the point where you could almost hear a dramatic sound effect. He looked like he was about to sprout horns like a demon. Seeing his own father like that, Matthew finally held his head in his hands.
I'm sorry, Dad.
He was trembling like a deer in headlights. Clearly terrified.
No, it's not like that with the secretary, it's just that.
"Oh, really? From Charlotte's drawings, it looks like you're quite close."
James responded immediately. The messages were filled with heart emojis, far from typical business communication.
No, it was just for fun. She asked me to do it, and I couldn't refuse.
"So you were just following the secretary's orders?"
But, I thought it was necessary for smooth communication with my subordinates.
"What smooth communication are you talking about?"
It was like a thunderbolt had struck. Taking this as a cue, my mother-in-law took Charlotte to the back room. Then, a fierce lecture rained down on Matthew for about 2 hours. Shouts of, "What are you doing with a wife and child?" echoed through the room.
"A man who neglects his family cannot be trusted to lead a company."
James declared that Matthew would be removed from his position as president and disowned.
"You are no longer welcome in the Smith household."
No, this is too much.
"You should realize the gravity of what you've done."
James glared at Matthew, silencing him. From that day on, Matthew's attitude towards Charlotte and me changed drastically. He started buying cakes and flowers and eagerly helping with household chores, as if trying to win my favor. However, I had already made up my mind. "I'm divorcing you," I said. After Charlotte went to bed, I spread out the prepared documents and handed Matthew a pen. "Sign here." Matthew, looking nervous and sweating, tried to persuade me.
I was wrong. Please, don't divorce me. I'll work hard to find a job.
I can't agree to that. I firmly pushed the pen towards him again, urging him to sign. After hesitating, Matthew took the pen from my hand and signed the papers. Of course, I will also be claiming alimony and child support. Make sure you find a proper job, I said coldly. Matthew hung his head in defeat. After that, I heard from James that Matthew was no longer the president and was now unemployed. He was starting to look for a new job. The beautiful secretary he had been seeing broke up with him as soon as he resigned. It seemed she lost interest once he no longer had the title of president. Having lost his job, his family, and his mistress, he ended up living in a shabby apartment. The house we had been living in was in his parents' name, so Matthew was effectively kicked out and had to pack up and leave. It was almost refreshing to think that I wouldn't have to hear his mocking words anymore. The divorce papers were accepted by the court, and my ties with Matthew were officially severed. However, I still keep in touch with my in-laws. After Matthew left, James came to visit.
I apologize for my son's rude behavior.
He apologized deeply, holding a box of expensive sweets, which made me feel apologetic. It's okay, really. Please don't worry about it.
As a way to make amends, feel free to use this house as you like, for Charlotte's sake as well.
Really, is that okay? I had been thinking about where Charlotte and I would live. This house was conveniently located near the elementary school she was supposed to attend. It felt like a stroke of luck. James even said we didn't need to pay rent, but I declined that offer. After discussing it, Charlotte and I decided to rent the house, and we continued to see my in-laws frequently. Charlotte seemed to be very fond of James, always sticking close to him. When she drew a portrait of him for his birthday, James was moved to tears. My daughter is now in elementary school and attends every day with great enthusiasm. At first, I was worried about whether she would fit in at school. However, once school started, Charlotte seemed to feel comfortable and was living her days freely. She even draws pictures in her sketchbook during breaks and shows them to her friends.
I'm going to be Picasso when I grow up.
What? Picasso? Picasso is often called the greatest artist of the 20th century.
I'm going to art school.
She said this with a serious face while working on her drawings in the living room. She had already created hundreds of drawings. Considering art school entrance exams is quite early for an elementary school student. However, she might actually skip grades and become an art student. When I told my in-laws about this, they responded positively, saying they would support her. When she was in kindergarten, Charlotte had trouble fitting in with her friends and faced many challenges. It was a tough time, but it turned out that Charlotte was simply a gifted child. Once we realized this, she was able to overcome the elementary school entrance exam and now has a goal of attending art school. This is a significant change. Believing in her abilities and talents was not a mistake. Though she is small, she is now taking her first steps forward. I want to continue supporting Charlotte so that her future will be bright, even if my contribution is small.
How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.